Today I'm going to make something called Scotch pies. 3 years ago I was in Scotland and I tried a Scotch pie and they're absolutely delicious. So I make them in these little tiny tins, and the recipe calls for 4 different little pies. So it's a really delicious, kind of unique dish in the United States, but it's very common in the UK. And so I'm going to show you how I make this, and it's a 2-part recipe. First you have the pastry dough, and then you have the filling. So I hope you enjoy this recipe. Okay, we're going to start with the pastry. We're going to start with 3 1/4 cups of flour and a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to leave it in a bowl, and we're going to heat up 3/4 cup of water on the stove to like a low simmer. Once it's hot, we're going to add 8 tablespoons of lard, and we're going to add 6 1/2 tablespoons of butter and melt it. Then we're going to put it in, make a well and put it in here. That's our hot water crust dough. So once it reaches like a very low boil, you kind of turn it down a little, and you're going to add your butter and your lard. Okay, we're just going to kind of stir this around, and we're going to melt all of it. Hot water crust is what this is called. So we're going to melt all this down. This is what it looks like when it's all melted down. So now you're going to take this off the stove. So now what you do is you're going to make a little well where your flour is, and you're going to pour this hot mixture in the middle of it, just like this. There you go. And now what you're going to do is you're going to use a wooden spoon and just kind of mix everything together, and you're going to have a dough. This is a really neat kind of way to make a dough. A hot water crust. So what this does, it kind of makes it more pliable. It's kind of more easy to work with the hot water. So now what we're going to do is take it out of the bowl and get a little bit of flour on our board, and just take all of this out. And we're going to put it all together. You don't want to work with this too long. You just want maybe like 45 seconds to put it all together. Just like this. It's super easy to work with. I love this dough. So you're going to have 4 pies that you're going to have, and so you're going to need 4 little pie crusts with a lid on top of them. So I cut the dough in 2 sections, and I'm going to roll it out and make 2 pies. We want to have a lid for the pie, because these pies have a lid, and we're going to have a bottom. So we'll do half of them first. So we're going to roll this out. So what you want to do is place your tin here and kind of give it a little bit of an overlap, and kind of cut around about this much to put in your little pan here. And then you'll just drop it in like this. Kind of mold it in. It's kind of a deep little pie tin. It's a 4-inch in diameter. So you're going to kind of mold this around, just like this. And if you have a little less on one side, you can kind of take some of this off, because we're going to trim this off in the beginning. I just want to make sure there's enough all the way around. So after you press it down and get it kind of even all the way around, you can trim this off, whatever is overlapping. Doesn't have to be with a knife, just whatever is easier. You're going to do just like that, so it's all even. So I use a fork and I go around my pie. That's just how I do it, with a fork. And then this is your first pie crust, and then you're going to take another tin and you're going to place it down, and this is going to be the lid that's going to go over it. And what you have to do is make a little circle around it. This is going to go on top after you fill it, and this will let it steam out. Any kind of heat can release off the pie when it's baking. So what we're going to do is refrigerate all of these. Once we get them all in our little pie tin, we're going to refrigerate them for a couple of hours to make them firm. And we're going to put these in between wax paper and refrigerate these as well. This is the easiest dough you'll ever work with. It's very, very pliable. And that's what the hot water does for it, with the combination of the butter and the lard. It makes it very, very easy to work with. So out of all the doughs that I've ever made, this is the easiest. It's very soft. It's almost like Play-Doh, if I could describe the consistency of it. So we're almost finished. We're making our last pie. So I do have quite a bit of dough left. So I have a larger, I think this is probably about a 5-inch, and I'm going to make use of the dough. You want to push down on the edges so it doesn't puff up all around, so you have a surface like that. So these are your lids. They're supposed to be a little smaller than the actual pie pan, but you'll push them down over the filling. So I have these layered in between wax paper, and I'll cover this one also. They're going to go in the refrigerator with the pie shells, and the pastry's going to be in the refrigerator for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours. So that's the next step. So this dough made quite a bit. It made 4 regular 4-inch little pies, and it made 2 5-inch pies, and lids for all of them. So right now we're going to put this in the refrigerator for at least an hour, maybe 2 hours, to firm everything up. And now we're going to work on the filling. So before we start the filling, I'm going to show you all the ingredients that are going into the filling. Traditionally speaking, a Scotch pie is made with ground lamb, but we're going to use beef, because you can use beef if you want. We're going to have a beef stock. We're going to have ground beef. We're going to have marjoram. We're going to have 2 bay leaves. We're going to have a little bit of mace. And like I said, the marjoram, which is a mild oregano taste. 1 onion and a couple of tablespoons of olive oil. So now I'll show you how we make the filling. So we're going to start by chopping 1 whole onion. You can do a yellow onion, white onion, whatever kind of onion you want. We're going to chop up 1 whole onion. So the first thing we're going to do is put about 2 tablespoons of oil in a heated skillet. And then we're going to add the chopped onions. It will be 1 full onion chopped. And we're going to saute these onions a few minutes until they're like translucent and they've cooked a little brown. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're just going to cook these 2 or 3 minutes. So this is just how we want it, kind of translucent. And now you're going to add the spices, which is the mace, the salt and pepper, and a little bit of marjoram. So all that goes in right now. It's all mixed together. So we're going to kind of blend all that. You can smell all the different flavorings. Okay, so now we're going to add our ground meat, whether it be lamb or beef. We're going to add that now. So you have all your seasonings in there, so you don't need to add any more seasonings. It's all in there. All you need to do is grind up the meat with your wooden spoon, and you're going to cook all this together on the stove. This has a very aromatic smell to it with the mace and the marjoram, which I rarely use together. It just is very unique, the fragrance of it. It just smells so delicious. So mace is the outer shell of the nutmeg seed. And if you don't have any mace, you can use nutmeg instead. They're similar, but the mace has more of a mild flavor and scent to it. But if you don't have mace, you can use nutmeg. Also, you want to break these big chunks down into small pieces as much as you can, because this is going to be the filling. So you want to break them down as small as you can. Okay, the next step is you add in 2 cups of beef broth. And you add in 2 bay leaves. And we're going to turn up the temperature a little bit to kind of a medium low. And we're going to cook this for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. So this is going to make a gravy later. But that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to cook this on low and let those bay leaves and all the seasonings in here soak in. You're going to put a lid on top of it and let it simmer for about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, so now we're going to take the lid off. This has been cooking in its juices for about 20 minutes. So now we're going to take it out of the pan and drain it. We want to save all the juice because we're going to make a gravy with it. But in the meantime, we're draining all the meat because the meat is going to go inside the pies. And we don't want it to have a bunch of liquid in it. We are going to remove those bay leaves too. We're going to preheat our oven for 350. And we're going to take out the pie shells out of the refrigerator, and they're going to bake for 40 minutes. So these pie shells, they refrigerated for about an hour, and they're very hard. So with the weather that we have, it's just right. So an hour should be just about right. So now we're going to fill these with our meat. And I'm going to start with the small ones because the large ones were the extras. So I knew there was going to be extra. I just wasn't sure how much extra. So we're going to fill these as much as we can. And all the juice has been drained out of the meat. We don't want the juice in the pie. We are going to put a little in there. I'll show you that. We're going to put a little juice in it, which will give it more flavor. I don't think I'm going to use the large pies. I'm not going to. I did have enough dough, but the recipe is actually just for exactly what I had planned, which was these 4-inch pie shells. So I'll do something else with those other ones. I have a shell. I'll find something else to make, but I have exactly what I need for these 4 pies, which is what the recipe called for. So now what we're going to do, I'll show you in a second. Okay, we're going to make a little hole in the center of each of these with like the end of a spoon or a knife or whatever. We're just going to make a little tiny hole, and we're going to add a little bit of this delicious broth in between and then cover it up. We don't want to add a lot, just a little bit. It'll just give it a little flavor, like a half a teaspoon of this broth. that is actually going to make a gravy. So just about like a half a teaspoon, we're going to put it in the middle and then kind of cover it up. So these are all done, and now we're going to take our lids, as we call them, and put them over. Oh, before we do that, we're going to brush the edges. So what I do is I just crack an egg, and I put a little bit of milk in, and this will be our egg wash. So you're going to whisk this all together, and this will be kind of like a paste for the lids to fit. So we're going to take our basting brush and kind of go around the edges a little, just like this. And then you're going to take one of your lids and you're going to brush the whole inside of the surface that's going to go on the inside, just like this. And it kind of acts like a little glue in a way. So we're going to like put this down, just like this, and we'll kind of crimp the edges around, just like this. It's harder. The dough has been refrigerated, so it is a little firmer, but you're going to kind of crimp it just on the edges. You don't need to have like any kind of edge like this if you don't want. It's not necessary. So this is what you're going to do. You're just going to kind of crimp the edges. Just like that. And this is the vent where all the steam will have a space to come out. So after you're done crimping the edges, you're going to take your basting brush and you're going to go around the edges, or on the surface, and around the little edges too, and you're going to brush that. So that's how you do your Scottish pie. And I'm going to finish the other ones, and they'll be all ready to go in the oven. So I'll show you when I'm done with all of them. So I'm on my third one right now. Like I said, after you put a little egg wash on the inside rim, you do coat the outside as well. Okay, so we have one more to do. And like I said, I am going to have to find something to do with the other two extras. So we're almost done. Okay, these are all done. They really look nice. And they're not going to look all the same. They look a little different sometimes than each other. So now we're going to put it in a preheated oven at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. But I always go a little less to check it first. So this is one of the rare times I use the bottom rack. We want the bottoms to cook. We don't want them to be doughy. So we do put this in on the bottom rack. So we'll see you in 35 or 40 minutes. So here they are. I just took them out of the oven. It took exactly 40 minutes for these to cook. After 35 minutes, I checked them after 30 minutes, and after 35 minutes, I moved them from the bottom rack to the middle rack just to get the tops how they should be. And 40 minutes was just right. So they're nice and golden and they look fantastic. So the next step is I'm going to make the brown gravy from the broth we had earlier. So here's the broth. I'm going to put it in a pot and add a little cornstarch with water and thicken it up. So the first thing we're going to do is add a little bit of butter. That'll kind of brighten it up a little. And turn it up to like a medium for now, kind of a medium. And now we're going to add the cornstarch with a little water that we mix together, and we're going to pour this in. And this will thicken this broth to make a gravy. Now you can have it as thin or as thick as you want it. You don't have to have it real thick. And if you want it thicker, you add a little more cornstarch with water. And if you don't want it thicker, you don't add anything else. So now we're kind of stir it up, and this will be our gravy that will pour over the meat pie. So I took the meat pie out. You want to do that while it's still warm, obviously not scalding hot. You can see the bottom is just how it should be. And that's why you grease the pans and you bake it on the bottom. That way the bottom won't be doughy. So now we're going to remove all the others. So the way it's served is there's like a brown gravy that's poured over it. We might as well put it on the mashed potatoes. Just like that. That's how they serve it. And then we'll cut it open. That looks so delicious. So we're going to have to taste this. If this doesn't look delicious, I don't know what does. This is probably one of the most rewarding meals I've ever made. All the work that goes into it, it's not a lot of work, but it's a little detailed. So you just don't whip this up. It's a two-part meal that you make. You know, the pastry first and then the filling. But I'll tell you, it's worth it. So let's give it a try. A little bit of the crust and a little bit of the meat with the gravy. This is indescribably delicious. Indescribably. Those seasonings that go into this are marjoram and mace. And I haven't made any other meal that has this combination. And when it's cooking on the stove, you can smell the aroma, and it is really, really, I mean, it goes beyond comforting. It is absolutely yummy. So I think if you make this, you will be happy. I hope you give this a try. Thank you.